Hello, gals and guys. It's your host, Phil Larson, and this is your motivational high five on Instincts. Let's do this. Hello, welcome. Just real quick here, just before last winter, I shared with you all that I launched the show on Patreon to help raise some support. There's some expenses that happen behind the scenes. And Patreon is a lot like Kickstarter, where you get rewards based on how much you give. And so far, we have 7 patrons through Patreon. Thank you for joining. And if you want to continue to support this podcast, there's a $1 level or a $5 level. And I was just thinking, $5 for 12 months is $60. I've been to counseling sessions that were much more than $60 for one session. And these things that I'm sharing on the podcast, for me anyway, have come through countless counseling sessions and through conversation with mentors and people I love and respect. And if at all any of this adds up to being worth a counseling session for you, would you consider to join the Super High Five Club for $5 a month for a year? With that, you get a shout out on the podcast, an invite to our private Facebook community, any say on future episodes if you want. And the biggest deal is additional audio content that I provide through patreon.com. So if you go to patreon.com/YMH5, the number 5, that's where you can join. Or even $1 a month, you'll get a shout out and an invite to the private Facebook group. Would you please consider, if we hit our monthly goal, then I will release 1 episode a week. Right now, we're just at 1 episode a month. So thanks for that and for joining my team. I would love to have you. Today on Instincts, I came from a day at work, though it didn't seem like a day at work. It seemed like kind of a wasted day, but it wasn't, because here we are. I have an episode. I decided I would go check out a car to purchase, possibly not too far from my work. So I left and got the car, drove it around. I liked how the car looked from the internet. And when I got to the car place, I don't know, it's just something felt weird. It was a tiny place, which I got nothing against that, but walking in and it was just kind of a mess. And the guy seemed extra friendly, couldn't put my finger on it. Got the car checked out at a local shop and some issues came up. Nothing huge, but still just felt weird, felt off. I came back and the guy was visibly frustrated. He just was not so buddy-buddy anymore and was just on the defensive. I brought up some legit concerns and he's like, oh, well, you just have to ask, do you like the car? And he was reluctant to get me the Carfax report. I get it. And the car only has 96,000 miles on it. It's 9 years, but it has 5 owners. Owners in Hawaii and Minnesota and New York and North Dakota. The car's been everywhere. Every 10,000 or so miles, it gets sold to another owner. I don't know. There was just something weird about it. I just didn't feel right about it. And I offered him a little bit lower price, and he's like, we have nothing to talk about. My instincts were telling me something about this situation that I couldn't quite understand or get. One of my best friends, Wes, his wife was talking about the best meal she ever had and asked him, what's the best meal you had? And he said this particular meal, but he didn't necessarily know why. And as he thought about it, well, it wasn't just the food. It was the lighting. It was the general environment and ambience. It was the company he was with and the good conversation they were having was his best meal that he's ever had. You see, a lot of things play into our decisions and experiences, and these are things we are not necessarily aware of at the time. You know, our brain is picking up on a lot of information, and when we are asked about it, we may not be able to give a concrete answer or reason why we feel a certain way or whatever. We just have a good or bad feeling about something. Maybe something seems fishy or might even feel hopeful. It's our instincts. A book I highly recommend is by an author who's kind of looked at as a business guru, but he writes all these books that's really have become very helpful to entrepreneurs. and it's Malcolm Gladwell, who has written several books, and one of his books called Blink, The Power of Thinking Without Thinking is the subtitle. And in there, he talks about thin slicing. There are things that our body is doing and our brain is picking up on that we can't necessarily process. And I haven't read the book in a few years, but one thing I remember is they were doing interviews with couples. And based on the interview, they could fairly accurately predict whether this marriage was going to make it or not. And what would happen is, as they would talk about each other, sometimes in the same room and sometimes not, they would slow down a video recording of them, and they would, what was called thin slicing, they would take it frame by frame, and based on how their face would be or manner slowed down, they could pick out certain aspects of the way the mouth would turn down or whatever. And what they would keep coming back to was this feeling of contempt that would reveal itself in a certain way they talked about one another. Contempt meaning that you think yourself higher than someone else. The face of contempt, which could only be seen through the slowing down of their conversation, looked a lot like disgust. And from that, they were able to thin slice and see that there was a lot going on beyond what they could see in real time motion to the naked eye. Another example of thin slicing, as he talks about in this book, is the classic example of Pepsi versus Coke. In the 70s and 80s, there was this big war between the two. And in taste tests where Pepsi would go out and they would offer small sips of Pepsi versus Coke, most people would pick Pepsi over Coke. And Coke saw this and they started coming up with a new formula, a new recipe, and they called it New Coke. And then they started doing the sip test and started beating out Pepsi. But what people realized was the thin slicing was too thin. For a sip, a sweeter, lighter beverage like Pepsi tastes pretty good. But for a whole bottle, people preferred Coke. All this to say, I started writing this episode thinking about instincts in a positive light, saying that we should trust our instincts. But that's not necessarily the case. What our instincts should do is tell us that there's something else going on. See, if Coke trusted their instincts, they would have stayed with this new Coke. It didn't work. But there was something else going on. They found that out. So in a way, yeah, our instincts should be trusted, but they should be trusted in that there is probably more information coming in than we know how to process. We need to use our instincts as kind of a warning light on a car or as an indicator to ask more questions. And for example, Beats headphones. Beats are really popular. People really seem to really like Beats. But as a professional in the audio world, I can tell you they're not that great. But why do people like them? Well, they kind of trick our instincts. If you were to take apart some Beats headphones, you would see that a lot of the parts inside the headphone are made of metal. They weigh more. And 30% of that metal have no function other than adding weight to the headphones. When something is heavier, it feels more sturdy, it feels more luxurious, especially with tech. So your instincts may tell you, Beats are nice headphones. Take it apart. It's a lot of unnecessary metal just to add weight. So what can we take away from this? Our instincts are important. If we're not under a deadline, take some time to ask better questions about your situation, about your instincts on that situation. Why do I feel this way? Tune in, ask some critical questions, and trust that your instincts can lead you closer to a more informed and wise decision. Definitely don't discount them. What we find in the book Blink is that you're learning as you get older, as you grow, as you have more life experiences. Your brain is cataloging and remembering things that you can't put words to. There's a reason why you feel a certain way. And I remember a story from that book where there was an artist that could spot a fraud, a copied piece of art that wasn't from the original artist. And he couldn't always tell why, but he had a feeling because he surrounded himself with originals and just educating himself with art. You are educating yourself, and your instincts should not be taken lightly. But question them. What are they leading you to believe? Is that belief true? And include people. We can't be experts on everything. Include your mentors and see it from all sides. You can only see your side. Sometimes you need help seeing another side. Trust your instincts, but trust them that they can lead you to a more full picture, a more true story. Ask the questions to flesh it out. You can do it. And here we are at the end of the episode. And like every episode, we include a positive affirmation. And it isn't some pseudoscience, it is science. It's neuroplasticity. With enough positive, encouraging voices coming into our life, we can begin to rewire our brain. Why? Because the neurons in our brains are not touching. So the electricity that gets shot back between them, basically the stories we've been telling ourselves, can be changed, can be rewired. And that's exciting. And we do that by looking at a reflection of ourselves in the mirror. When you find a reflection of yourself, will you say this? I can trust my instincts to lead me to the more accurate picture before me. Friends, this life is tough. There's a lot of voices being thrown around. There's a lot of stories being told and not all true. Trust yourself. You are wise. You can find out the right answer. You can find out the truth. Let your instincts, your gut reaction, let that inside of you. It's not an accident. You're a product of all your experiences leading up to this point. And those experiences were true. No matter what other people tell you about whether they were true or not, they were true. And you can use those to better yourself, to make the true decisions. I believe in you. And there are other people who listen to this podcast that have spoken up to me who are like me, who are generally positive and hopeful people that are accomplishing a lot of things in their lives. And they're overcoming a lot of negative stories and hardships. You're not alone. If you want to join us, reach out to me or find us on Facebook or whatever. Do enough digging to find what you need to find. Email me at phil@thestoryshop.tv, or I'm on Twitter, Phil_Larson. If you use the hashtag YMH5, I will see it. Maybe not right away, but eventually I will go back through there and find you. Our private Facebook group is called Internal Motivators. But if you join the Patreon community, then yeah, I'll be sure to reach out and invite you to that. I'll send you a link that redirects you to the page. Join us. Let's do this. We're better together. We can offer different sides of the story. We can get a more full picture. You're not meant to do it alone. But that's a decision you have to make. It starts with you.